The difference between these two is essential. Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle. However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having zero power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left.
The word democracy is not written into the Constitution at one time. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the Declaration of Independence.
Nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. At the extreme right, there is no government. The extreme left features any form of total government. Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. Toward the middle of the political spectrum can be found the type of government limited to its proper role of protecting the rights of the people. That's where the Constitution of the United States is. Those who advocate such a form of government are really constitutional moderates.
Founding fathers hated the idea of a democracy. In a democracy, 51% of the people control 49% of the people. America was founded as a constitutional republic. 99% of the people can't take away the rights of 1%. You have your rights because you were born with them. You have God-given human rights. No matter who they are, I can't take away your rights.
So let's analyze the basic forms of government. They are monarchy or dictatorship ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few, democracy ruled by a majority, republic ruled by law, and anarchy, which is ruled by no one. Looking first at monarchy or dictatorship, this form of government doesn't really exist in the practical sense. It's always a group that puts one of its members up front. A king has his council of nobles or earls, and every dictator has his bureaucrats or the men behind the scenes. Oligarchy, which is ruled by a group, is the most common form of government today. Most of the nations of the world are ruled by a powerful few. At the other end, we find anarchy, which means without government. Some people have looked over history and found that many of its worst crimes were committed by governments. In a state of anarchy, everyone must be armed, and movement is severely restricted because one's property has to be protected at all times. There are some who advocate anarchy, however, not because they want no government. It's a quick transition from something that exists to something desired by the power-hungry. These calculating anarchists work to break down the existing government with rioting, killing, looting, and terrorism. Tragically, the people living in such chaos often go to those best able to put an end to it and beg them to take over and restore order. And who is best able to put an end to the chaos? The very people who started it. The very people who started it. The anarchists who created the problem then create a government run by them, an oligarchy, where they have total power. Civilized people have always hired someone to do the guarding, a sheriff, a police force, or some branch of government. Once law enforcement was in place, the people were freer. They could leave their property, work in the fields, and so on. In short, the proper amount of government makes everyone freer. The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule.
They make us believe that we're a democracy and that majority rules.
This, of course, sounds good, but suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained.
Hitler was elected. Hitler did everything legally.
If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule. What about republic? Res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law.
Wasn't it Benjamin Franklin, to paraphrase, that said, democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner?
Exactly.
A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone.
And then he also said, in a republic, the sheep would have a gun to protect himself.
America's founders had a clean slate to write on. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the founding fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy. There was a man named Solon who urged creation of a fixed body of law not subject to majority whims. Based on what they knew of Solon's laws, they created the 12 tables of the Roman law and in effect built a republic that limited government power and left the people alone. Since government was limited, the people were free to produce, with the understanding that they could keep the fruits of their labor. In time, Rome became wealthy and the envy of the world. In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed, the proper limitation of government. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet. Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security. Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
I don't care what the majority wants. I live my life as I choose. And if I don't commit violence, theft, or fraud against another human being, I can live my life as I wish. We're put on this earth to become the best individuals we can be, to fulfill our God-given potential. Right? We're not here to put on this earth so the government can tell us how to live our lives. No. The same thing in health. If you're sick, you have to have a certain protocol. Nonsense. Be individuals. Think for yourself.